All right, let's call our meeting to order. It's Wednesday, December 8th, and this is a scheduled meeting of the Zoning Bylaw Committee. We scheduled this meeting for purposes of another session to invite public input into the process. That's the primary reason for tonight's discussion. I see three residents in the hall, so good evening to you. Right out of the gate, I'd like to at least offer each of you, I don't know if you're all here to offer comment or just observe, but if you have a specific question or concern about the draft bylaw, I'd invite you to step to the podium, and if you don't mind just giving us your name and address, so we can record that, and whatever your comments or concerns are, we're hopeful that they are specific to, an area of the bylaw or an item of concern, so that there's the possibility of our addressing it, as opposed to, more of a general, I'm in favor or I'm not in favor of the bylaw, because it is a very comprehensive proposal. And there's stuff in there for everyone, if you will. But enough from me. So let me offer you folks the opportunity to give us some feedback. Anybody? Feel free, don't be bashful. We're here for you.
Evening. Craig Spinelli, 140 Cardigan Road. More of a general question. In the use tables, PB isn't placed in some of those boxes, which I'm assuming stands for planning board. I just wanted to understand the kind of the rationale behind that and how that works, what that does.
Mr. Sadwick, could you maybe, because you guided us through a lot of that discussion, could you speak to that?
Yeah, so the PB is for planning board special permit. And the way that I normally talk about uses in zoning bylaws is that there's uses that are not allowed, so those show up as Ns in our use table. Uses that are allowed by right, which is the Ys, which means you basically are allowed that use and just need to come in for a building permit. And then there are the uses that need to have more scrutiny, and so those are done through special permits. And in Tewksbury, for the last 20 years, we've had the planning board as the primary special permit granting authority in town. And you see that in a number of communities, I think they're kind of shifting to where the planning boards are serving as the special permit granting authority. Here in Tewksbury, the planning board's running every 2 weeks. The Zoning Board of Appeals could be a potential special permit granting authority, but they primarily deal with variances to the zoning bylaw in Tewksbury, and that's where their real specialty is, that and comprehensive permits. But the PB is for planning board special permit.
Okay, and I'm just wondering if there's the real benefit between, I guess, saying no in that column as opposed to the special permit. Is it just like to speed things up, keep things moving, just to make it an easier process, or?
Make it a harder process.
It's
Well, a no would be a no, so a PB makes it.
Well, then there's no process.
Right.
It just means you cannot do it under any circumstance. Whereas with the planning board, you have to go through the whole process of the hearings, publicizing it, notifying abutters, all those things. So it's the in-between, I would call it, the in-between no, and just your right to do it without really telling anybody. Because if it's a yes, as Mr. Sadwood pointed out, you're just getting a building permit.
Right.
The two people right next door to you aren't even gonna know you're doing it until you're doing it. Whereas with, an approval process, there's notifications, there's hearings, there's discussions, things have to be brought in, signed off on by experts, reviewed by town officials. It's much, when it says planning board, that's true in that we're the permit granting authority. But I think Mr. Sadwick would agree that it also means that it's going through the town's process, which means there are a lot of, engineering. everybody's looking at it, depending on what it is, to whatever degree is necessary. Police, fire, they're all gonna sit down and have, an initial meeting. So there's more than just the planning board, but the planning board is the one who's gonna vote and give the permit. But it's a much more involved process than a yes.
Right. No, thank you, I understand that, I appreciate that.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening, Karen Sleva, 254 North Street, cast of thousands, I see. I just wanted to bring up a point that you guys were talking about at the last working meeting. There was some reference to marijuana and the uses table and whatnot. And I know that there's going to be, at your next working meeting, discussion about that. And where we were talking about the uses, and you had taken out MFD and office research and put in the storage facility use, I was also suggesting or wondering if, like, even a manufacturing or, that type of marijuana use could be added to that use table, as well as I think that would be, even if it wasn't retail, that it would be a benign use for a location such as that wouldn't be traffic oriented or detrimental to the neighborhood, and I think would be something worthwhile to consider. And I would also ask, did you guys receive any additional comments that you're going to be discussing tonight as well, since there aren't that many people here?
Yep, so great questions. And excuse me, just to respond to the first one first, I'll get to the second one. As you pointed out correctly, we have not discussed the topic of marijuana in any capacity yet. It's on our next agenda, I think is the 20th of December. So we will take that topic up, and I'm sure everybody made note of what you suggested as an alternative, and we'll give some consideration to that. You know what's in the draft currently,
Right.
but we, as this current group is comprised, have not addressed that topic yet. We will, and either on the 20th or thereafter, we'll make any changes or modifications to what we feel is necessary in that area of the bylaw or proposed bylaw. So we can't really answer that tonight because we haven't, gotten into the details yet. Relative to other public input, since we last met here and had a public input session, to my knowledge, we've received no further communications in written form from any residents. We did, as a committee, ask Mr. Sadwick to help us distribute to those people who did ask questions or offer insights. In some cases, they weren't questions. A response as to what this committee has developed thus far, if we could answer the question or offer comment. And that has been done. So in every instance thus far, people have had that inquiry or question, or concern responded to. And quite frankly, a number of them have responded back yet again to either acknowledge it, just, passively, or in some cases have said the answer was satisfactory, and now if that's the case and it stays that way, I find myself to be in a position to be supportive of the bylaw because my concern has been resolved. So that's not across the board 100%, but I think there may have been 8 or 10 of those inquiries, and that's the status. So we don't have any new questions, if that's your question.
Well, that's good to know that you guys responded to the people that did write in, and that you got some additional feedback. Again, I just, I know you guys have been encouraging it, but I would just like to make a plea to the residents as well that, this is your chance to come out either physically by attending a meeting or just send some questions in, send some suggestions in. I mean, this is your town and, this document is gonna, proceed going forward. So, if you want to say anything now is the time. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Karen, Mr. Chairman, before you go, I just want to make sure that we're understanding you. You're talking about just manufacturing.
Right now, unless something
Well, I
else
mean,
should come up.
In that particular location.
Yes,
Yeah,
because
okay, 'cause I don't want someone to only listen, they only hear half, and they'll say, oh, and then, we get into a real, because unfortunately, I can't be here on the 20th, so I just wanted to make sure that the record said that your suggestion was, in that
Right.
particular thing, manufacturing.
Manufacture, research, whatever the uses that were.
Anything but
approved.
retail.
Pardon me?
Anything but retail.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I'm gonna-
I understand that hasn't been voted, favorably on as yet. I would think maybe now that some time has gone by since that last proposal, that things might be different and people, seeing it as a revenue source, because I'm sure people are well aware that there's one going right over the line on 38 in Lowell. And it's just like with the billboards, it could be so close to the line, but they're going to get the revenue. We're not. So might be something for people to consider in the future. Thank you.
Mr. Sadwick, you have a follow-on to that?
Yeah, just so that everybody's aware, I have the bylaw in front of me, so I can quickly reference it. And the article that went to town meeting back in May did have cultivation, research, and manufacturing in the office research district at that time. So it wasn't the last draft, and it's carried forward right now, but again, the meeting on the 20th is going to kind of open up the whole discussion about marijuana again. So there'll be an opportunity for the committee to take a look at that, and also the whole retail component piece. Not for the office research district, but for any other locations possibly in town.
So can I ask a question? Because, again, because we have residents here and because the topic's been brought up, I know no decision to be made, but just again, for a little bit of clarification, of those 4 possible things that were created when the most recent marijuana law was passed, of the 4, currently the 3 of them we have in town in the current bylaw. They were also put into the draft of the new bylaw. So then that would be cultivation, research, and manufacturing.
Correct.
The only thing that we did away with, at least to this point, was retail. There's also medical, which exists in the current bylaw and the draft.
Correct.
So for anybody who has any, because again, you pointed out having any thoughts, because we are going to discuss the topic next time, if anybody has any thoughts on those things, just so it's clear to them, what exists now, what was being proposed. The only real wrinkle here that we may be discussed and no decision made yet is that last piece, which is retail, and that would include where it might be able to go, where it can't go, and all those kind of things. The same kind of things we discussed way back when we did medical marijuana. We had the exact same type of discussions, and we would have those in the event that that's what it is and which districts it can't go into. But I would ask for clarification. So just for clarification, you were not suggesting for retail for up there, though. Is that correct? Okay.
Any other comments on that topic? Okay.
Could I, because we have a lull just because the other gentleman went up, and I should have asked it then, I think, but he brought up the question on the use tables. Were there any specific use on the table that you had an issue with the way it's currently being presented? Is it better to know now than night of?
No, and I wasn't even commenting so much on the planning board being the board. It could be any board, any committee. It just has a feeling as a town that the decision is being removed from the residents and placed into a committee's hands. I understand it has more scrutiny, so what I was trying to understand, excuse me, is why those particular ones, the committee, bylaw committee felt it was okay to pass those decisions on to a different committee or board as opposed to the town residents at town meeting. That was kind of where I was, I guess, asking my question. Why those particular ones were designated for further as opposed to a yes or no.
So then the only clarification, so no one gets confused then, is there is no instance in which the people of the town issue permits. That does not exist.
No, I know.
All right, no, what you just said, I just don't want anybody who just heard that to think that it's being taken away from anybody in town by having those listings. The only options currently in our bylaw and pretty much anybody else's that I know of are basically yes, no, and some permit granting authority. And no one that I know of is the town itself, like, meaning like town meeting, the permit granting authority. It's some board. So
Right, but-
here we do it with the planning board most of the time.
I guess what I was trying to say is this will be voted on at town meeting. So that's the avenue that the town will vote on who has the approval, if you will, to pass those permits. And so in that regards, where it's not a yes or a no, they're advocating or passing that decision on to a committee, whether it's the planning board or any other committee for that matter. That's what I was asking about. It wasn't so much, why the planning board. I fully understand why it would be the planning board. It was just, felt like it was, being taken away from the residents to control what goes on certain sites and given to another committee to make those decisions. But I understand the process is actually much more involved in order to pass those types of permits. So I appreciate the
The town
explanation on
meeting it effectively has the last word on the structure that's being proposed.
that. Right.
And if it's approved and adopted, then effectively the residents are delegating that responsibility in that middle area to, in our town, to the designee, which is the planning board, by special permit, right? So there's a process. But if you, and the only comment I'd add is we have to do that at some levels because we meet as a town meeting 2 times a year. Business has to be conducted. I hear as a selectman, one of the most common comments is we need to bring more business into our community. Route 38 needs to have more business. If I told a business owner, you can wait 6 months and come to town meeting, they'll be in the next town in the next day. So we have to have a process that is more flexible and allows us to operate without necessarily having town meeting be the ultimate determiner, in my opinion.
Yep, no, understood.
You want to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say, so the way the state law is, Chapter 40A, it basically says, like, here are the rules, right? But every municipality can choose how those rules are implemented, and that's why we have a zoning code. And I refer to, like, the use table, for instance, as yes, no, like yes by right, no, absolutely not. And in this case, special permit means it depends. So that's where the discretionary piece happens. But in every municipality in Massachusetts, who makes those decisions, whether it's an elected board or an appointed board, that is determined by town meeting in your adoption of your zoning code. So that's where, like, the town meeting people have the choice, because if, town meeting was like, we don't want it to be the planning board, we want it to be the select board, or we want it to be the Board of Appeals, we have the complete right to do that, right? Depending on use, depending on district, depending on what we want to do, how we want to conduct business. So town meeting determines how we want to do business within the law. But the law also states that we have to assign that regular approval or denial authority to someone. So we, I think as a committee, felt it was in the town's best interest to do the elected planning board, whereas some cities and towns do appointed boards, and that can get a little sticky. But the elected planning board represents us at every election at town meeting. So in that way, it's really kind of powerful, opposed to, I think sometimes appointed boards sometimes can be more political. But everyone has to, use discretion in decision-making, and we have to trust them to, do what's best for the town within the law. So,
I'm sorry, I have one last point to make. Just on the website, on the zoning bylaw committee's webpage, on the left-hand column, there is a comparison of use tables that was updated for December 2nd, and that shows what's being proposed, so those Ns, Ys, and PBs, and then compares it to what is in the existing bylaw. So you'll see that we have a lot of this in the current bylaw. We've added new uses to this zoning bylaw, things that we felt needed greater definition or breakout, and that's why you see some of the changes. And in other places, the committee here said that they didn't feel it was appropriate in that district. So that gives you a good snapshot of what we have today compared to what's being proposed.
Okay. If I could, one more question since I'm up here, I guess. On that theme, on the website, so the committee's met maybe just a couple of times or so. Is there any updated document on what's been discussed already and kind of decided and moved on? Or will it be all at the end, a new document if one was to come, or how does that work?
Right, so again, on that left-hand column there's a summary of changes to the proposed zoning bylaw through December 2nd, 2021. So that lists changes that the committee has heard either from the public or has decided amongst themselves to advance. I think there were like 6 or 7 different topics within the text of the bylaw. Then there were some changes to the use table, and there were also some changes to the definition. So that's all listed in that summary there.
Okay.
I think it's like 3 or 4 pages long. It's very quick and easy to look at. And then the draft bylaw itself is up now with those revisions in it, and it's listed as revision 1 right now.
Okay,
So
great,
it's all
thank
there.
you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Bob O'Brien, Cardigan Road. I have a question about something I brought up in the past. I know I've got a response from Mr. Sagwick about what the committee is endorsing. It's regarding fee in lieu. I understand with the fee in lieu, they would not be included in the bylaw for MFD, but they will be available for subdivisions. And can you explain or clarify the logic behind that, please?
Excuse me. We did have a pretty lengthy discussion about that. I don't know, Mr. Sadwick, maybe you're best equipped to kind of outline that in the context of the concept, but.
So the concept was that there would not be fee in lieu of allowed going forward for.
Steve, I can't, it's muffled. Sorry.
It's like our Friday morning meetings, isn't it?
Yeah.
So going forward in the new bylaw, there would not be a fee in lieu of allowed for multifamily developments. And I think the committee felt, one, that there's a higher generation of affordable units in those types of developments, and two, that it was less discernible from the exterior of what the affordable is compared to what the market rate unit is. And then when it came to the subdivisions, obviously, it could be quite obvious within a subdivision which the affordable units are compared to what the market rates are. And our numbers have just run a lot lower in those types of units. Having a subdivision of 39 units being built on Marshall Street, I've been here for 20 years, and that's probably the largest subdivision that I've seen, and there's not many more parcels of land that are going to see that level of development. And in those, we're taking 10% of the total units as an affordable requirement. So it's either the developments there or the fee in lieu of on the subdivisions. Multifamilies remain at 15%. So that was the thought that the committee, and there was a lot of discussion about it at the committee level over the course of a few meetings, and I can tell you that this goes back to the current draft, or the article that went to town meeting that had, I think, the same split there. And there was a lot of discussion back then, too, with the planning board about that breakdown.
Now, how does that concept improve our posture as an affordable housing community? I don't see how it does that. It doesn't make sense. I mean, if we're in need for affordable housing, they should not be exempt from that rule. Affordable housing is all type of home structures, condos, apartments, rentals. It should also be included for single-family homes. So that's my point on it. The other question is, or the statement is, if the board, this committee, is going to endorse that or advocate that for the bylaws, I think there needs to be more meat to it. There needs to be more substance to it, meaning, and like Mr. Salwick alluded to, and I'm not directing this at him, is, well, you can look at a neighborhood and say, well, this house is affordable housing and this one isn't. If you go through any neighborhood in Tewksbury, unless some of the ones that are past 10 or 15 years, you're going to have a 400, in today's value, you're going to have a $400,000 house, you're going to have a $500,000 home, you're going to have a $600,000 home. I don't think people say, if they drove down to new development, oh, that's affordable housing, that's not. I think it's only cosmetic. When I say more fiber to it, I don't think it's be based on view or perception. It should be looked at, a checklist. It meets 8 out of 10 checklists. The checklist could be the size, the scale, the acreage, the footage. Couldn't be just say this is affordable and this is not. There needs to be some fiber so it doesn't put the responsibility on whoever the decision-making board is to make that. It's subjective. It's subjective. I've witnessed some of the prior planning board meetings, and people said, okay, I don't think that's okay. I think it's okay. Yeah, all right, okay. You need some fiber. You need some value to it. And I don't know what that is. I could chart something up if you would like, but the point is, if you need to equate a numerical value or a grade to maybe 8 or 10 or 15 positions, descriptions, and then if there's 10, and if it meets 7, it passes. If it meets 4, it fails. If you're going to go with the affordable housing allotment, I think by having it, it's going to make more difficult for the decision-making bodies, and I think it's more subjective than it could or should be. But I think you need a value on it, some type of value.
Okay.
So.
All right, thanks for the input. Yep.
So,
that's-
and also one other question is, if you decide on something or endorse something now, could that change when you make the final decree? Or is it if you decide something now, and something could change, it's not locked into what's going to be in the bylaw proposal by the committee?
And I'll just try to answer that. There's no rule book here, okay? This is a committee process. What the committee is trying to do, because we have a very short timeline, is address an issue and move forward to the next series of issues. That does not mean that we can't look backwards, and one of the things that we do have on our calendar of meetings is, in early February, is a full draft review.
Okay.
So for example, if we found that we think we need to revisit something, there's an opportunity or a window to do that. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that we will go backwards, because we have a very short window to accomplish what we're trying to do.
I understand that. Now, what is driving this short window? I mean, the first bylaw meeting I went to, this committee said, why are we having it? The town meeting is spoke in May. Why is the gavel banging down that we have to have this bylaw meeting reviewed in a 10-month window? I don't understand. What is the driving force behind that? Who is or what is? I know the bylaws need to be rewritten and adjusted. No dispute. But why is the time clock on for you people having to, the bylaw committee have to jump through all these things to review it? Why is it such a short time frame?
So you
And
an-
you alluded to the short time frame.
Yeah, and you answered the question in your own question. The answer to the question is that there's almost universal opinion in our community that the current bylaw is old and broken. And there is a draft that can change that. And the only way it can be changed is at an annual town meeting.
Okay.
So we made a decision as a committee to revisit the issue, and in order to get it on the May warrant for consideration, we have to have all of our work done by early February so it can be printed and put in the warrant. So that was when we started the process. We worked backwards from that point in time, and that drove our consideration. Bear in mind as well, Mr. O'Brien, that the draft that we're starting from is not being built from the ground up, right? We already have a draft, so we're refining based on some of the lessons learned, some of the feedback that we've received. There are new members on this committee that bring a different point of view. So there's a compilation of reasons that allow us to start with what was arguably, let's say, 90% complete, and we're playing around and looking at and evaluating the other 10%. And those are just my estimations, right?
And my position is I don't want to see this committee or any other committee have to go through this
Thank you.
6 months or a year from now on some of the
Thank
things
you.
that were overlooked or missed because of the expedited
Yep.
timeframe. That's
Yep.
all. That's
It's
all. I
a
know you guys
valid
don't want to go
concern.
through it again, and I appreciate what you've gone through.
None of us want to do this
Okay.
again. I can assure you. I can tell you that my spouse doesn't want us to do this
Fine.
again. And I will also say with certainty that no matter what gets presented, and hopefully it gets passed, but no matter what gets presented, there will be need for change down the road in some areas. The existing bylaw that we've had for in excess of 20 years has in 150 or so
Right, right.
adjustments to it. God willing, we're not going to have to make 150 adjustments to a new one.
Okay.
But there will be need for change. So nobody should be fooled like this is the gold standard and it never, ever, ever will require adjustment. Things are going to happen.
Okay.
We didn't have a pandemic in February of 2020. Now we do. There's language that we've learned as a community and a culture that didn't exist a year and a half ago. There are going to be things that affect this bylaw that we're going to have to come back and address down the road. It's not perfect. It may never be perfect. But my opinion personally is it's a far cry better than what we have to work with right now. And the number one thing that I have here, and the reason I'm sitting at this table, is for that very reason. If you do a poll and you talk to people, and you folks are here tonight for a reason, there's concern about the way we do business right now. So we can make the choice and say, that's good enough, and we'll put this in the fireplace, and we can all enjoy our evenings moving forward. And we will all come back and continue to be dissatisfied. Or we can move forward and make the change and then tweak it as we need to from there. That's, I think, why we're here. And I want to thank the committee members. There have been a number of others, predecessors, that have made an exceptional effort thus far. As some of you are aware, this process has unwound over a number of years. So that is a huge commitment, and nobody here is getting wealthy. The paycheck is not a very high paycheck.
So,
In
thank
fact,
you.
we can double everyone's pay.
So before he leaves the podium, if I could just throw a couple of things out. You had made a suggestion for the subdivision version of the fee in lieu of, where you come up with
Correct,
some
correct.
criteria as a checklist. You know, your concerns about the planning board's golly gee approach.
Yeah, I think it's
to
too
doing-
subjective.
Hold on. So one of my, that's one approach. I'll throw out another one.
Sure.
Just to hear your opinion on it in case it
Sure.
goes forward if we decide to discuss this again. And it's a little simpler than, a longer checklist. I don't necessarily support it, but if you just simply put something in that said, if we are not yet at our 10%, you can't give the fee. But if the town is at its 10%, then it's the rules we currently have in place for subdivisions, not MFD. Obviously, those, we're not going to take the fee in lieu of, period, for those type of developments, but for the subdivision. Because there's a decent chance fairly soon, we're going to be well over the 10% anyways, so it really won't be a problem. So in that case, I might not be against having that as being the main determiner of whether or not you can consider the fee, because I think it would be a real mistake to just simply remove the fee, period. I think ultimately it will hurt the town because there will be no way to put money into the Affordable Housing Fund other than going to town meeting and asking everybody to put money into it in the events that you need it, when you need to buy down units, when you need to use it for things like the habitat housing, or the veterans housing that we're currently putting money towards. Eventually, the money that's in there is going to run out if there is no way to replace it, which means you're going to have to come to town meeting. We're back to the other Mr. Johnson's comment, which is that can only happen about every 6 months, which is somewhat problematic. So to eliminate it completely, I think, is unwise. But if maybe people considered putting the limit on that if we haven't reached the 10%, then you can't take the fee. But once you have, now it can be considered, whether or not that would work, as opposed to, a big checklist.
I just think that based on what Mr. Johnson said was, I'm taking the reverse on. I understand what you're saying. There's a solid point there with are we or are we not at the 10%? But I don't know who's watching that on a regular basis, number one. Number two is if we have an opportunity, like Mr. Johnson said, T. Johnson said that whatever we have in this bylaw is not perfect, we could review it and write it in 6 months from now, a year from now. Let's take that approach. Why don't we delete it now? And if we need it, you're saying we should have our 10% for a long period of time, hopefully, possibly. But if as we start getting closer, maybe consider putting it back in the bylaws instead of having it in there now. So instead of making this, like I said, a checklist, let's just say, all right, if you don't put it in there now, a year from now, 2 years from now, if in fact we get close to that 10% threshold, consider putting it back in. I'm not saying make a decision on that now, but look at that option and look at that logic.
Did you have a comment? Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you.
So you're gonna, consider either option. I mean, but I think that's, I think for the committee, for whatever board is going to be the gatekeeper for allowing it, I think the criteria right now is light and weak, and I think it needs to be beefed up. That's all. And if this group, I respect their input and their involvement. If this group believes that it should be in there for subdivisions, my point is fine, but just make the criteria a little stronger so it doesn't put you people on the fence and say there's no dispute about it. That's all. Okay?
Yeah.
Mr. Mackey, you want to follow up?
So I was actually, when Mr. O'Brien was done, I'll jump in as kind of an aside.
Done.
Perfect. Quick aside, something you had mentioned, Mr. Chairman, and from some of Mr. O'Brien's comments is the beauty of the town meeting process is that there is a mechanism for residents to bring specific things up that they would like to see changed. We're not going to get everything right 100% of the time. And it's not always a board or committee that needs to open something for discussion or start a process. A lot of things can be handled by a resident if there is an issue that they see they want to see addressed. So if this version passes, there's something that you don't like, or any committee anywhere has something that gets general bylaw, anything, there is always a mechanism for residents to go out and affect change. So again, I wanted to wait till you were done because it's not directed at you. It was just based on some of the discussion.
No.
I wanted to bring that up.
So, and I think, I know it's been spoke about in the past about people going up and debating something at town meeting which should be done at this level. Okay, no dispute on that. Someone goes up there because either they lack knowledge before the town meeting or didn't do anything about it, which is probably pretty common. I think it's to prevent any ambiguity at town meeting about this, do it now. Do it now, right up front. So someone can't come up and say, what about with it? This is, so just, I'm trying to make it cleaner and more concise for everybody.
Good feedback. Thanks
All
for the
right,
comment.
thank you.
Yep. Oh, Erin, you want to?
Yeah, I just, maybe Steve could just kind of clarify a couple things that were brought up. Item one, how do we, as a community or as a municipality, monitor our percentage? That's question one. Because I think it would be good for people to know how we kind of stay on top of that. And then number two, just some clarification with the fee in lieu of. It is as, I don't want to say as written, because nothing, as it is in the draft now, it is considered discretionary, correct? It's not a guarantee in fee in lieu of. A petitioner would have to ask to do a fee in lieu of, but they can still do the units if they so choose. So it's an extra ask. And then who is the body in which that makes the determination about the fee, whether or not the fee in lieu of is appropriate? I guess those are kind of some clarifying things right now that I think would be important to kind of share.
So question one, the monitoring that occurs is actually done at the staff level. So Department of Housing and Community Development puts up the subsidized housing inventory on their website. I think they update it every 2 years. Remember that the denominator of that percentage is based on the federal census. So that denominator changes once every 10 years. So really what we're watching is what's happening with that top number, the number that they're showing as affordable units. The affordable units that are created in this town have to be reported to the Department of Housing and Community Development, and we do that at the staff level. So just for example, the project at 2230 Main Street that's going up across the street from Hafner's, that project had to fill out an application that was a requirement of the planning board. It was done through the town manager's office. The select board chair had to sign off on that. It went into the state. There was a lot of back and forth, which happens on almost all of these types of applications, between the attorney for the developer and the state. We're copied on all of this. The state sends us back a form that tells us that it's been accepted as a local action unit. Then we, the town, have to submit more paperwork back to the state requesting it be put on the subsidized housing inventory. So all of that is done at the staff level. If some units that are affordable come up for sale, we get notice of a right of first refusal that comes to both the town manager's office and to the housing authority. And then we work on how to see if the town is willing to participate to keep that unit affordable. So we have another one of those that may be coming before the selectmen before the end of the month. So that's kind of how the monitoring occurs. The one thing that we don't control on that inventory is group homes. So group homes in any community that are permitted through the state can show up on your inventory without us being notified at all. So it's just it's a raw number that shows up. It's 96 units scattered throughout Tewksbury that come in through Department of Mental Health or whatever state agency it is. So all of that is how we make up that subsidized housing inventory. The fee in lieu of is it is discretionary, and it is at the planning board's determination on whether or not to accept the fee in lieu of or to require the units to be built in the development. That's how it's currently written, and that's how it would be for subdivisions in the draft. And then I don't think you asked this, but just to kind of close out the loop on the whole thing, the body that determines how the fee is calculated itself is actually, under the current bylaw, it's done by the local housing partnership. Under the proposed zoning bylaw, it would be done by the Board of Selectmen. And the thought of this committee was that it would be the Board of Selectmen because the Board of Selectmen oversee the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. The formula that we've had in place has operated, I think, since 2008, and it's probably one of the best formulas that I've seen from any other type of municipality. We borrowed it from someplace, but I think we have done some revisions to it that have made it reflect market conditions. And, you know, the last time that the fee was calculated, it was at $206,000 per unit, and that was done probably 2 years ago. So the next batch, or the next round that I expect to see, we'll see that number go up even more. But that formula, again, like I said, reflects market conditions and has worked well. Was that all the questions?
I think so.
Okay.
Can I just go back to that?
Sure.
When you say discretionary, that's at the local level, right? Discretionary, it's at the
Yeah.
local level, okay? And not to go back too far in the past, but I think that's what you mentioned. We have a great program since 2008, a very active but in 2015, 2016, 2017, at 2017, our HPP said we were in good shape for the next 5 years with a subsidized housing inventory. We're in good shape. I hope when that happened, everything is dynamic, like it's been referred to by most of you people. And I'm not sure that number was watched close enough between 2015, 2016, 2017, because there was a huge housing boom in Tewksbury in the, in those 5, 6, 7 year period. And our subsidized housing inventory stayed flat. So I think if there was more of a look or track keeping of where we were going, we wouldn't have possibly allowed all those waivers on multiple apartment buildings built in this town. And I think that if we stayed on track with that, just saying, like you said, like I said, we can, it was mentioned, well, we can change the 10% as we get close to the 10%. Mr. S. Johnson mentioned that as one of our options, and I'm not disputing that. But the point is, we need to watch that. We need to watch it regularly. I think everyone thought possibly we're on easy street in 2017, and then when the 2020 census comes out, hey, we got a gap here. We're in trouble town. We don't have enough affordable housing, and we're kind of sort of held hostage right now. So that's my point. We have to stay with it. You got to stay on it. It's a big issue. Personally, it's a big issue to me. And I think with again, with the Massachusetts guidelines for 40B is they prefer small clusters, 4 and 8 unit buildings of affordable housing that are mixed in with the rest of the neighborhood and not having these big, massive structures. That's one of the key tenets of the 40B guidelines in the state. So don't lose sight of that. And to have, I know I'm going out of range here, but to have all the 40B units in town clustered in one section of town also gives an indication of, hey, this, I don't want to say the projects, for lack of better words, but it gives that indication the kids that go to the doing school, well, it won't be the North Street School, but those kids there, they're not, how can I put it, sorted out throughout the rest of the town, throughout the rest of the community. So, but I think if we go that approach, we got to keep track of it, and that's why I say, let's remove it. Let's remove it.
Just let me comment briefly on that, and you made your point, but the way we run our education system here is it's K through 4
Okay.
in different buildings, and then it's 5, 6, 7,
Right.
and 8 in single buildings in the high school.
Good point.
obviously. So that concern isn't 100%.
That's right. My kids are older, I agree with that, so.
Okay?
And soon,
My,
3, 4
Yeah.
together.
Yeah. So
My-
soon
my,
there's going
my-
to be even more
yeah,
centralization of
good
this.
point, very good point.
So-
But also, let's not lose sight of the fact that 40B is affordable housing,
Yep.
not subsidized,
Right.
low-income
Yep.
housing. That's a mistake that people
Right.
continue
Yeah.
to make. So to
Yeah.
refer to 40Bs as projects
Yep.
is a misnomer at best.
Yeah.
I mean, Mr. Savage just told you $200,000 or 206 with it likely be up. I'm not sure how affordable that sounds to some people, but that certainly is not going to be considered low income. I mean, not low income, sorry, like subsidized housing
Yeah.
as opposed to affordable housing.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why I think we have so much trouble when a 40B project gets brought up, because everybody thinks it's.
Actually, so,
It's
well, I was
about
gonna say, so,
$55,000 in income as well.
right, but the fee itself is actually the difference between the average market rate and what an affordable rate would go, what an affordable home would go for. So take that 206 and put it on top of whatever the market, whatever the affordable unit is what our market rates are going for. So if your market rate average is 600,000 and we're taking 200,000, that means that the affordable unit is selling for 400,000. That's the way that those numbers work. So it's, to look at it, the fee itself, it's, the fee is just what's on top of the affordable cost.
It's not Section 8 housing, it's.
No, I'm not saying it is, but I think if you look at the biggest one we have in town, the maintenance of that, if you're paying $3,000 a month, I would expect, if I was a tenant, to get a little more for my rental fee, because it's not based on the towns, but it's whoever's managing the property, so.
Okay. All right, let me give someone else a chance.
Okay,
Do you
no,
have- Do you have a question or a concern, sir? that-
I do.
Please, speak up.
Certainly.
You've been patient and,
No worries. I'm actually just going to pass this down to the board.
Okay. Thank you.
My name is Al Salas, and I'm talking to the board in reference to 623 Main Street. It's a building that's been vacant for quite a few years, right on Route 38 there. And I'm speaking to you about a particular issue regarding zoning. It's regarding the general business code and the bylaw. I'm speaking particularly in section A, number 4, I believe. It's referenced on my letter here, there to the board. But hearing everybody here, first of all, I want to thank you guys for all the work that you put into this bylaw. As you know, climate change is happening, and it's a problem for everybody, not just the community of Tewksbury, but our state, our country, the world. And we need to do something about it as a community. And so where our whole idea is to develop a project there that addresses just that. My company's name is Eco Auto, and we are driving green energy forward. Our goal is to retail charging stations to consumers as well as businesses to be able to eliminate the infrastructure challenges with the new things that are happening regarding electric vehicles. Everybody wants to drive an electric vehicle, but where are you going to charge it? Right here in the town of Tewksbury, we have 8 charging stations. How many residents do we have? And so our whole purpose is to, by driving green energy forward, is to focus on the charging stations, the energy, selling systems to customers that actually save them money, and more importantly, have whole holistic systems around their transportation. So we plan on retailing hybrid and electric vehicles exclusively, as well as retrofitting that building, bringing new life to that building with more net zero impact or positive impact back into the grid through the installation of solar panels and some other things that we want to do in the building. But the goal of being here is not to talk about the project, but talk about the zoning. And although that property at 623 Main Street is perfect based on prior use, the location itself has got a water feature built inside of it. It just kind of fits the whole eco-friendly model that we're pursuing. The zoning disallows it. And so I'm moving this board to make a consideration regarding the zoning either on that property or in the general business zoning in order to allow a project that drives this type of energy forward. Because I believe that when this zoning board or created the bylaw in 2002, I believe, electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles weren't such a big deal, but it is the future. And what I hear today is that the community of Tewksbury is all about the future. You guys are thinking right now about what is going to happen in the next 3, 5, 10 years in the community. And I can tell you that the residents of Tewksbury, the businesses of Tewksbury are going to be driving these types of vehicles. And this will be an opportunity for Tewksbury to be on the map regarding this particular topic and give an example to the rest of the communities around Massachusetts, United States, and, who knows, the world. But we just want to start here, if possible.
Interesting that you brought this up because I was driving over here, I'm thinking, we have, this is I'm looking at one now myself, but
Interesting.
Mr. Johnson has one, and but what I was thinking is that if you listen to a lot of people in Tewksbury, none of them eat donuts, they don't buy pizza, and they don't get their car serviced. So, they don't. I mean, it was 25 years ago, we said, thou shalt not put any service stations or anything automotive on Main Street because this is like Sturbridge Village. Well, we need to have services. Some of the gas stations are going out, they're gonna be changed over. That particular property is already there, so to me, it's a crime if it doesn't. And Steve, I know I'm getting off a little bit, wasn't it looked at whether or not there'd be some grandfather protection on that particular piece of property? The problem that we have in Tewksbury is we don't allow use variances, or we do allow use special permits. And I think we could take a look at this, especially in some specific locations along Main Street, because the building's there, it's a perfect location for it. There are gonna be more people with electric cars, and not just for charging stations, they do still require some type of service. They're not, totally.
Definitely.
So I think your timing coming in is impeccable, because that would be something that we could just, pop in the use chart, and I think that's in one of those mixed zones.
No, it's in the general business district,
business
but
district, yeah.
that district runs to this property, I think. It doesn't go much further than this. So, again, it's not that it would extend all the way down Route 38. It would cover from about this property or the muffler shop, really, up towards Walmart.
But do we have automotive use? Because, automotive use is
Well,
it's a big bugaboo.
we would allow for new auto sales.
Yeah.
Being that this is used auto, we run into a little bit of a problem. And, I had a conversation with an attorney on Monday, I think, who's also interested in this site, but was talking about used automotive for high-end automotive. So he was talking Bentleys, Rolls Royces. It was kind of explaining to me that, which I kind of know, but when those dealerships are built, or when they're rebuilt, you actually have to fit your franchise models. So Honda told Atamian what they were looking for, and Atamian had to build that. IRA just redid their dealership to meet what the IRA model is today. So, for us to carry a new auto use in the bylaw for just that property alone is most likely not going to work there. So there has to be some type of solution. And again, this sounds like a great idea here. And I had mentioned to the attorney who couldn't be here because he had a hearing someplace else. I said I would run it by the committee, but there was this interest, and it's, I would never have thought about high-end automotive used sales, but I guess there is a market for that. So that's where we stand on this property right now.
Yeah, so we never got any kind of feedback as to whether, remember we talked about whether it was an abandoned use, is it abandoned, is it not abandoned,
We're-
is it grandfathered?
Yeah, I think the building commissioner and I are both pretty firm that that is both abandoned and discontinued, which is what our current bylaw requires. We have a higher standard than what 40A requires. And there's just no way that you could prove that it hasn't been abandoned or discontinued.
Discontinuance, the hard part.
Yeah,
Abandonment, you can say that it's been marketed, it's been looked at, it's been maintained, taxes have been paid, it's not abandoned, but the discontinuance use, it hasn't been used.
I think I saw a guy in there changing his oil one day on the parking lot. Is that?
Yeah.
Send a slip.
So again, there are people at this table that are far more experienced than I am in this area, but if I'm hearing you correctly, and I go back to the earlier conversation about the use table, this was a dealership. It's no longer a dealership. So now it's, under the current bylaw, it's a no. It can't be a dealership,
under the current bylaw, correct.
right?
Yep.
Under the proposed draft, is there any relief valve, either through the bylaw or through the town meeting process, that would allow for some flexibility?
As the draft currently is written, it would not be allowed. We would only allow for new auto sales in the general business district.
Okay.
So there's really no relief there because it is used. If this bylaw passes and this comes in as a separate article to change that use, the general business district will be established, and it would be an easy fit at that point if it came in as a separate petition from
Through the town meeting process,
through the town meeting process.
provided that the draft or proposed bylaw is adopted.
Correct. Yep.
And that it wasn't included in the draft.
And then it wasn't included in the draft.
Right.
Right, if the committee decides that
Yep.
you don't want to do it, or,
Okay.
right.
Can you walk me through that a little bit? I'm just,
So, let's see. As far as the options are concerned, one, if this whole draft doesn't go forward, the current bylaw doesn't allow for it. Two, if this draft goes forward but does not include what you're proposing and is approved, then you could come back at town meeting and ask the town meeting to allow for this. That could occur in May as a tag-on to this, or it could occur in October. But that's kind of the option that Todd was alluding to. So it's up to the committee really to decide if they want to include it in the draft or not. And I don't think that they're going to make a decision tonight about that, but there's probably some options that are available, and we'll probably kick those around. One of the things, even though the next meeting is specifically geared towards marijuana, there'll be follow-up conversations of things that we picked up on this evening that could come up in discussion at the meeting on the 20th, and this probably would be one of them.
So, Mr. Chairman.
excellent, thank you.
Can I just get some clarification?
Sure.
Just on the letter, from a zoning code perspective, on the letter, we're looking at the bolded. Item 1 and 3 is the same language, really from a zoning code perspective, because it alludes to used vehicles, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So, I see from the zoning perspective, I see.
I just want to make sure, so I know what your intention is, but I want to make sure how it's interpreted, that first request and that third request it can be addressed as one thing?
Yes.
Okay, and then question 2, regarding bullet 2, which is allow green energy projects to overlay. When you say green energy projects, do you mean that are complementary to your use? Or is it primary to your business?
Great question. So my business model includes both. So I don't know how you would, what I'm proposing is some options that would work for our use. But obviously, it's at the discretion of this board and its members of what you'd like that language to read and what the town of Tewksbury would be comfortable with.
But my question is, are you saying it's like charging, when you say green, are you saying charging stations? Are you saying solar? Are you saying battery storage? Like, what does that, when you say green energy, what does that mean?
I'm talking
For your
about
model.
projects that focus on renewable energy, and all of the things that you talked about are things that would be included
Okay.
under that.
Okay, so that is a much bigger conversation, because obviously, like, EV charging is an accessory use to the property. Battery storage or selling of green energy is different when it comes to the use table of a zoning code. Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Correct. Which is why I wanted to
No,
encompass.
totally. I just
the
want to
global
make sure
picture.
that we are, when it's time to talk about it in greater detail, we're able to talk about like every aspect of that.
Fair.
Okay.
Okay, so for your particular need, I know you're talking about a global green thing there. That probably would not, I mean, the committee might say, yeah, okay, let's go along with something, but that's going to require a lot of investigation. When you zero it down to that particular property and you say sales and service of new and used hybrid or electric, vehicles, that's an easier thing to convince town meeting about than to say, okay, everything that's in general business on Main Street could possibly have green. So what a scenario could be is that if the committee said, yeah, maybe we'll think about allowing that with a special permit, in the general business district, or not, and then you bring in an article, you'd have to prepare an article, you have to find a local person who can sponsor the article or an attorney that can speak for you. And then this would go on after the regular bylaw, Steve, right? If it was in a petition. So let's say
Yeah.
we take the whole bylaw, it comes up at town meeting, Article 40, and it passes. You might be Article 48, and you say, okay, or your representative, whoever says, we want to put this in. If the committee has voted on it, and if the planning board has chimed in, on all zoning articles, and they're not opposed to it, you might be able to get it done this May instead of waiting till October. I think if you're looking to do green, which is great, on all general business areas, you're probably looking at either October or next May.
No, I'm looking for the former.
Yeah.
If that's all right.
So what,
To Mr. Johnson's point, as far as a business owner, time is money, and we want to make sure that we're doing this project. This is the future. This is something that we've looked at several locations. This just really happens to fit the bill geographically wise, the location wise, the prior use. There's a lot of factors that really go for this particular property, and the community itself is motivated to do green projects. I mean, you guys have had, as a community, the community of Tewksbury has had already an initiative towards electric and charging stations, one being here in the library. That's where it's going, but I wish I had the luxury of waiting almost
well, no,
that time.
and there's, from the town's perspective, we want to get the most tax money we can. And
We pay.
Right now, there's no personal, it's commercial property, and if it's vacant, if I owned it, I'd be down in the assessor's office saying, the tax is based on commercial property, the revenue generated, it's empty, I'm not generating any revenue, you can't tax me on the brick and mortar, so. Plus, you have personal property tax, everybody that owns a business knows it and loves it, but we want that money. Plus, we want this good, clean, what did we talk about? Clean industry coming in, creating jobs. So, for one, my personal perspective on this is maybe we can do something to kind of get you pointed in the right direction, and then have you bring in your own article, because unless the whole board wants to jump in and kind of spot zone that one spot, I'm not sure we want to do that, so, but you do have an avenue, and you can meet with the.
I'd appreciate the help of
staff,
this board in
meet
any
with
way,
the town
shape, or form.
staff and,
So,
go forward.
do you have a comment?
Yeah, only in this is that I wouldn't discourage you from any approach, Mr. Cuco's. The only thing I would say that in operation though, if we pass this bylaw and 5 minutes later, there's an amendment to the bylaw before the ink's dry on what just got passed, the absolute first thing that's gonna come out of a whole lot of people's mouths is, why are we amending the bylaw we just passed? Why wasn't it already in there? So, to me, I'm not saying don't do it. I'm simply saying the likelihood of success in that way of going about it seems unlikely. I mean, I hope we'll discuss this, because I think green things are worth discussing, and if there's a way that this might work, and I'm all for that. I'll just warn you that I think that the better bet, at least talking about May, is if something ends up in the proposed bylaw, as opposed to a waiting amendment to a bylaw that literally just passed, fingers crossed. You know, and the immediate reaction is gonna be how, I mean, I expect to hear that if someone tries to change it in October, you know what I mean, let alone the night of. So that's the only thing I fear in a separate action. If it can't get in here, feel free. I just, you know, I don't see a successful outcome as likely in that approach, that's all.
Yeah.
Fair.
All right. So you've given us some good information. You've heard some feedback. We're not going to make a decision tonight. You know that. We have a number of meetings scheduled. I think it's safe to say that the interest of the committee is to have a further discussion about it. I don't know what the outcome will be, but I think you can be assured that we will have a conversation about it and evaluate it. I want to just correct one thing from an understanding perspective. We don't control anything. We're making recommendations to town meeting. Town meeting has the last word. It's their decision. So no matter what we do, it has to be approved at town meeting, or what we recommend, right? So just so you understand that, this body has no authority to do anything, you know, other than make a recommendation. So,
And with that in mind, just for the record, just, I forgot this one. The only one thing I wanted to add, and very briefly, is that I want to encourage the town of Tewksbury and the community to think about including it in the bylaws now. And the reason for that is because if you don't, it's going to be a matter of time that another project comes along and you will have to consider it, or, you know, it's just going to be a matter of the future. It's either now or you're going to do it in a year, 2 years.
points made.
And when it comes to green energy and electric vehicles. But thank you very much for
Well,
listening.
thank you for
All right.
bringing it forward.
Thank you. Aaron?
Just one quick, can I ask Steve or Mark or both, before we have the discussion on GB, how the proposed bylaw would deal with green initiatives? Or how it would be, because if it's going to, like, we don't need to add it if it's going to be allowed, or if there's a problem, unforeseen problem, we should probably have a conversation about whether or not we want to address that. So I just want to know that going into that discussion, because if we need to talk about it, we should, but if we don't, we don't
Agreed.
have to.
Yep.
Well, then we'd have to
You
define.
do that as a takeaway?
Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I think there's two issues with this property. One is the reuse of a building that was designed for a specific use years ago, cars. So maybe we should be looking at something as special permits that would allow reuse of an existing building.
Good point.
And try to be, that's partly being green, maintaining and keeping buildings and not tearing them down and starting all over. Maybe something under a special permit that says reuse of an existing building would be open to special permit. And then we can decide if that, well, you guys can decide if that is worthy to go into that existing building and it's going to be a good business for the town or something.
Yeah,
This happens all the time on the abandonment. You know, these issues, you got buildings that were designed for one use, and it got zoned out. Now it's gone, it's thrown out, but used cars, this sale, this is a good use of that building, you know, to maintain that stock. So maybe we should be looking at something broader than him, town-wide use of existing buildings.
a couple of old gas stations.
Yeah, we got things like that around town and how to use them and how to fit something that's good for that neighborhood, the way that neighborhood currently is, that would work.
Okay.
Just a thought.
Yep. So there's a takeaway we want to ask you both to kind of collaborate on and bring some info back to us, and we can put this on an agenda when you're ready.
Yep.
And we'll discuss it again. Okay? Thank you. All right. Anybody else? It's 7:19. I get to go home and have dinner? Okay. All right. Any other business?
Steve's not gonna let you go
Any other business? You have some other business.
I will be, this is less than 2 minutes.
Okay.
One, I just want to remind people again about the webpage for this committee. We have not only the comparison of the use tables, which was December 2nd, we have the zoning map that's up there that I'd like people to take a look at. The proposed zoning bylaw, there's a table of contents comparison so you could see where things are moving in the bylaw. The draft, as of December 2nd, is up on the website. Also put up on Monday is a side-by-side comparison of the final draft to the existing zoning bylaw, which is a really good way of looking at something that you're familiar with in the current bylaw and seeing where it lands in the proposed zoning bylaw. And then, like I said earlier, the summary of changes to the proposed zoning bylaw through December 2nd is up online on the webpage. All of the minutes from this reconstituted committee are on the webpage also. And then just lastly, I want to point out that we're cutting over into a new email system right now. So the comment Mr. Johnson earlier about emails not being received, there have been some glitches that have occurred, and I would expect that I at least have one that I'm aware of right now that I'll bring to the committee's attention for the next meeting. So that's all I
Yeah,
have.
thank you for that. That's an important issue.
Does the
All right.
fax still work?
What?
Fax still works, right?
Yeah, it does.
Have one of those?
All right, anything else from the committee? We meet next on the 20th of December.
Just one thing, I don't know if we
Yes.
ever did say, but Mr. O'Brien had the suggestion of some possible checklist items that he might want to send in. You might as well send them in, then we at least have them when we have the discussion.
Just, food for thought, if the board is going to receive it, it
Yep.
could be way out of line, but it could be something that's, fair, so,
Yeah.
Sooner rather than later, sir.
it'll only be 3 or 4 pages.
All right, last chance for last comment. All right, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Wait,
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.